We're joined now by Senator Roy Blunt, Republican of Missouri. Senator Blunt, thanks for joining us this morning. You just heard General Honore right there. He said it's time for Congress to pass this funding.
Well, in terms of a supplemental budget, I agree with that. I think we need to be looking at what our needs are. We need to be thinking about how we're gathering intelligence as it relates to the Capitol. And what we're doing to recruit and what we're doing to train. I think that's maybe even more important than the size of the force. As the former chairman of the Rules Committee and now the top Republican on that committee, certainly working with the Capitol Police to help solve these problems and working generally to look at how we secure the Capitol, but at the same time make it as secure as it needs to be, but as free as we could possibly make it. It's an important element of who we are. It's an important symbol of who we are, and we need to keep that in mind with every decision we make.
So no question, this permanent fencing still has to come down?
I think the permanent fencing should come down. I don't think it does the job. In fact, the fencing was right there. When the car drove through, the question, how far back would you ever establish fencing? One of the things that General Honore talked about weeks ago was the fact that actually fencing can create a false sense of security on a daily basis, some kind of temporary fencing that can be put up when you need it, like we always secure the Capitol before the inaugurations, two of which I've chaired, is an important element to that event. But I think it'd be a mistake for fencing to be a permanent part of the Capitol. The message we send is the wrong message. Frankly, we're probably preparing for the wrong thing. The idea that what happens next at the Capitol will be what happened last is almost certain not to be the case.
Are we indeed seeing intelligence? I know you have a special focus on Capitol security. Are we indeed seeing intelligence that the Capitol has become more of a target?
Well, I think the Capitol's always been a target. It was a target, I'm sure, on 9/11. It has been a target over decades, and we need to be aware of that. I do think really doing a better job of analyzing the intelligence we have, knowing what we should be prepared for. Frankly, the new Sergeant-at-Arms in the Senate has a military intelligence background. The new Sergeant-at-Arms in the House was in charge of the D.C. Guard on January the 6th. They both bring something different to the police board than that board has had in the past. I don't think that board is perfectly structured, but I do think those two people, with the architect of the Capitol, Naval Academy graduate Brett Blanton, who was in charge of building projects at both of the airports before he took this job, Dulles and National, has a great security background. So I think we ought to be listening to them, and we also ought to be looking at what we do to make that police board work more functionally when there is a moment of crisis, and all three of them are distracted in other ways at that time.
Let's talk about President Biden's infrastructure proposal. Your leader, Mitch McConnell, has already signaled Republicans are going to oppose those proposals, but polls show that investing more in roads, bridges, high-speed rail, broadband is widely popular. Any worry that the GOP is on the wrong side of this issue?
Well, I'm actually for all of that. If the proposal was to do just that, I don't think there'd be a problem with a bipartisan group of supporters for this package. I've reached out to the White House a couple of times now and said, you've got an easy bipartisan win here if you'll keep this package narrowly focused on infrastructure, and then the other 70 or so percent of the package that doesn't have very much to do with infrastructure. If you want to force that in a partisan way, you could still do that. Why would you pass up the opportunity here to focus on roads, bridges, what's happening underground as well as above the ground in infrastructure, broadband, all of which wouldn't be 40% of this package, and that would be a stretch, I think, to get all of those things to 40%. There's more in the package, George, for charging stations for electric vehicles, $174 billion, than there is for roads, bridges, and airports and ports. When people think about infrastructure, they're thinking about roads, bridges, ports, and airports. That's a very small part of what they're calling an infrastructure package that does so much more than infrastructure. That I understand the dynamic of taking a popular title and wrapping it around a big bill that it's a fairly small percentage of, but it's the difference in whether you'd have a bipartisan, easy win or a very partisan, broad-based $2.25 trillion package.
But that still leaves open the question of how to pay for it, which Republicans have also signaled they're against the tax increases, the corporate tax increase that President Biden is proposing, raising it back to 28%, which is still below where it was before President Trump's tax cuts. The stock market is booming now. Corporate profits are up. So isn't this a good time to invest in some of those profits in the future? And if not a corporate tax increase, then how would you pay for it?
Well, it would be a corporate tax increase. Of course, we go back to the first or second highest corporate tax in the world, which works to our disadvantage as businesses are thinking about resourcing, bringing things back to the United States, restructuring how their companies are put together. The corporate tax is an important element of that. Every Republican in the Senate who was there in 2017 voted for the 2017 tax bill to ask them to turn around and within less than 4 years turn that around is a very unlikely thing to happen. But again, if you went back to infrastructure and looked at the way we've traditionally financed the infrastructure of the country and added to that some public-private partnerships. I've introduced a bill with Senator Bennett in the past and Senator Warner in the past, a slightly different bill that would get us some new funding sources, figuring out how, if you're going to spend all this money on electric vehicles, which I think is part of the future, we need to figure out how electric vehicles pay for using the system, just like gas-powered vehicles have always paid for it with a gas tax. It's a system that you can figure out how that part of the system supports itself. And again, then you can have a bigger, different fight on all the other things this bill purports to do.
Senator Blunt, thanks for your time this morning.
You bet.